Okay, let's look at some of the features of SQL Server Management Studio. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file. So File, Save As. I could just use the default name SQL Query 1, and let's put this in Downloads. Not actually a great idea, but so it's saved. I can close it. If I go back to my Downloads folder and I go to Downloads, I have example.sql. By default, SQL Server Management Studio is configured to open this files with these extensions. So if I double click on that, it opens it in SQL Server Management Studio. On the left-hand side, you have an Object Explorer. You can close it, and then if you want to get it back, you can go back to Windows. You can reset the window layout, which will include both the Object Explorer and this Properties pane. Properties is about your connection, so close that for a little more screen real estate. I'm going to go to Databases and Object Explorer, and this is all the databases that are on the database server. So the server is running on cisdbss.pcc.edu. It has a bunch of databases on it. You'll have access to some of these databases. Other databases are used for class projects and examples and so on. So some of the databases you have access to are the IMDb database, the names database, and let's see, there's a TV database, which is interesting. So let's go ahead and open one of those databases. We've started with names, so let me go ahead and open names. Inside of names, you're going to see some tables. So database is a collection of tables. Each table is like a spreadsheet in Excel. This particular database has 3 tables. It has name counts, names, year, gender, totals. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and say select top 50 star from name counts. And I can select that query and hit execute, and just that query will run. Now I get an error because at this point SQL Server does not know which database I'm accessing. It just has opened this file, but hasn't executed any of the commands in there. And this command right here, that's the one that tells it which database to use. So if I execute that, now this connection is associated with this database, and so I can go ahead and execute that query. And so here are the top 50 rows from name counts. I can do the same thing with select top 50 star from names, and that's going to show me the first 50 rows in the names table. Now, later on in the course, we're going to learn about all of these different tables and how they link together. But for now, for starting out, if you look under Views, you'll see there's a view called All Data, and we'll learn more about what a view is. But basically, I've written a SQL query that stitched these 3 tables together and selected some of the key columns. And then a view presents an interface to that, which looks just like this was a table. So I can, once again, execute this query, select top 50 star from all data, and that's as if I ran a query on all of 3 of these tables combined. Now, if I go ahead and look at a different database, so for example, let's look at the TV database, and I open the tables there, I see the tables in the TV database have a different, there are a different set of tables associated with this database. And if I wrote the same kind of SQL command, select top 50 star from show, if I execute this, I'm going to get an error. And you already see that show is highlighted here. Once again, the problem is I'm looking at the names database, and so I can only access tables inside of the names database. But I can fix that the same way as I fixed this query up here by saying use TV. So if I execute both of these commands, it switches the connection over to the TV database and then selects the top 50 rows from the show table. So let's go ahead and save this file. You can use Control S to save, or you can just select it from the menu. And let's look at a few more features. So we've seen execute. I can execute an entire SQL file like so with nothing selected here. And what that's done is it's switched over to the names database, and then it's executed the first 3 queries. 1, 2, 3. Those are all the queries on the all data name counts and names tables. Then it switched over to the TV database and executed 1 additional query. So there's a table from the show, or data from the show table in the TV database. So SQL Server Management Studio by default is presenting these things in grid format. And the grid is handy and convenient because you can scroll through it. And if you need to, you can resize these things by dragging them around. But it's also presenting an abstraction on top of the actual data. And this is convenient to work with, but it doesn't always give you the full picture on what's going on with the query. So what I'm going to do is, you'll notice this button here, it's got a little picture of something that looks like a spreadsheet. I'm going to switch, and if I hover over that, it says results to grid. This is results to grid, and it's selected by default. I have other options though. I can send my results directly to a file. That's results to file. But this one over here, results to text, that's the one that I'm going to ask you to use sometimes in this course. So I'm going to click on results to text and execute the query again. And this time what I get is, instead of the grids, I get a textual representation of the information that came back. And so this is a little more awkward to work with because I have to scroll around in it and I can't resize columns or anything. But it's showing me literally what's coming back from the database, at least in terms of the width of these fields. So you'll notice that some of these fields are really wide. Like metaphone, for example, most metaphones are really short. But you'll see that this is actually pretty wide in the result set that's coming back. And so I may want to use some cast or convert operations, which we'll learn about later on, in order to make this column be narrower. So you can see how wide the column is if you're in text view, but you can't actually see it when you're in grid view. Now I'm going to switch back to grid view for a while. And let's execute the query again. So now I get it in grid view. And I want to show you what happens when you make a mistake. So it's really common. You will make lots of mistakes when you are working on this stuff. And so let's say you have a query in the middle here that's broken, like select top 50 star from name counts. And I just have a little typo there. I misspelled top. If I execute this query, what I get is a syntax error in the messages pane, incorrect syntax near 50. And then it's highlighted here, so I can fix that. Now, some kinds of errors are, so that one was fatal. That was a syntax error and it stopped the thing right away. If I execute it, it works correctly. But other errors might have different kinds of results. So like name counts X. If I execute it now, you'll notice that it ran most of my queries. So it ran the first query on all data, the second query on name counts, but then it hit this error and it stopped. And I got my message coming back in the error messages pane, but I didn't get a full set of results in the results to grid here. So I have to fix this and rerun it in order to get my full set of results. Now, some commands in SQL, and there will be some in the lab starter files that I give you, are going to have commands in them that cause messages to be echoed to the messages pane. So for example, print if I add that command and execute, I get my results coming back. But if I look in the messages pane, I see messages about how many lines I got back from the database on each table query I ran. And I also see the text hello world here. And so some messages that are displayed, you need to look at the messages pane to see. If I'm in text mode and I execute, I get back the results. And I also get, let's scroll up, that output from the print message right inside of the report. So the next thing I want to show you is inside of these tables. So I'm going to go ahead and open the channel table, for example. You'll see that there's columns. And this is showing me what columns are in the channel table. So if I go back to here and add select top 50 star from channel and execute that, should already be in TV because that was the last database I was using when I ran it. Here are the columns I get back. So there's a channel ID, a sort order, an external ID, and then display name, channel number. And I see that set of columns matches the columns that are listed here. So there's a sort order, channel ID, sort order, external ID, display name, and channel number. Now, there's some additional information here that I don't have when I just look at the results. So either in text or if I switch back to grid and execute this statement again. So there's nothing here that's telling me about the type of the data or the width of the data, but that information is here. So I see that channel ID is an int, which is an integer number. Sort order is a number. External ID is something called a varchar 200. Display name is a varchar 200, and channel number is an int. There's also additional information about these columns. This thing has a little gray key next to it, which means it's a primary key for the table. We'll learn more about what that means later on as well. And I think that's most of what we're going to be using for now. We'll show you some additional stuff you can do in the interface later on, but I think that covers it for now.